organizers. Please welcome. Dear colleagues, on 26th, 28th of April, we are going to hold an international conference with a rather a long name. Democracy at the Crossroads, New Politics and Civil Society Development in Ukraine. A rather long one, but substantial meaning, because it will be about the new content of the policy, about the civic society development in Ukraine. It is about also really about the crossroads situation. This conference is first of all meant for civic society representatives both in Ukraine and abroad, from those countries that cooperate with Ukraine. Throughout the conference, we plan to discuss and develop many plans and recommendations, ways of solving the existing problems. We'd like to see how representatives of the civic society and NGOs can work to see changes happen in this country in the most efficient, prompt, and irreversible way. The first impetus to that was shown actually during the Revolution of Dignity, when leaders of numerous civic society movements and many individual citizens have started working to change something in the country to the maximum of their individual and group capacities, to see these changes finally happen in the country. Now we see a unique chance to make these capacities available in the civil society, to consolidate these for the sake of joint steps to be taken. The event will also feature representatives of civic society organizations from other countries, not only from the Central and Eastern Europe, but also from the Northern and Southern America, Africa, Asia. That is, we're going to host people really keen about changing their own societies, having great practical experience, who are ready to share their experience with their peers, and who are also ready to tell about the lessons they have learned to save Ukraine, its efforts in the area of development. Couple words about the conference, 26th and to 28th of April. That is 3 days. We're going to have 6 plenary sessions and 11 panel discussions. Quite a substantial and serious agenda, but given the number of participants from Ukraine and abroad, and the big range of issues to be discovered, this will provide, we hope, answers to those questions that the Ukrainian society faces. On the first day, we'll discuss the issues of Ukraine at the crossroads and Ukraine as the pivot nation, during which we will discuss the situation in Ukraine and around Ukraine. The second plenary session will cover new policies in the area of civic society development in Ukraine. It will be about new quality to be attained, new policies to be developed, our expectations from the government and officials, and ways of meeting the demands of the civic society. We will discuss potential vectors of civic society developments in Ukraine. On day 2nd, we are going to have the 3rd and the 4th plenary sessions and some of panel discussions. The panel discussions will be covering the administrative and territorial reform, decentralization, ways of improving civic society movements in the country to reflect the realities proper for this country and for other countries like countries of Africa and Asia. It will also tackle the issue of responsible journalism and the solving of local issues. And I think we are going to highlight the impact of the media and unbiased journalism on the solving of issues of importance for local communities. I'd also like to remind you that we are going to have regular local elections this year, and the input of the media to this will be of paramount importance. Further on, we will discuss issues of new national identity, a very important matter for many Ukrainians today. We will also discuss energy independence of Ukraine on its way towards the United Europe, and prospects of development as regards the background of independence, energy independence. On the following day, we will discuss civic society leaders in the parliament and the government as a chance to bring changes for the better. Probably the last year was the first time when the civic society received meaningful presence in the parliament, and it is about time to look for ways of fostering relations between the civic society and those who have managed it to the parliament and those civic society institutions currently active in Ukraine, in an attempt to find right methods of interaction and cooperation. This explanatory session will deal with the Russian propaganda and ways of countering it, which is of great importance with a view of the current situation in the country. On the day 3, we will also have several panel discussions on illustration, on transparency, fight against corruption, reintegration of IDPs and military servicemen. We do understand that there are several European countries with experience of potential value for Ukraine, say the Balkan states. We are going to tackle on Georgian experience of managing post-war situations and post-conflict situations. We will also discuss economic growth, efficiency, because the society may not develop without economy. And we have quite a big number of CSOs efficiently working in this area. We will discuss ways of overcoming the gap between the society and the politicians, a relevant aspect for Ukraine. But more panel discussion will expound the election reform in Ukraine. We will try to find other alternative points of view on election process. We'll also discuss the Eastern European Partnership and global consequences. Because we don't understand that Ukraine being a central country is Europe, and situations and developments in this country necessarily have their impact on European and international affairs. I'd like to briefly cover the range of conference members and invitees. So mostly it will be people from CSOs, but we will also see representatives of the political spectrum, particularly those who have made it to politicians from the civic society organizations. And people will speak about new things they've had to face having come to the government, with a view of their previous experience of activism. We'll see current MPs, ex-MPs who maintain tight relations with the civic society in Ukraine, and we will also have a range of foreign invitees representing various non-governmental organizations and representatives of some bodies of government. This will be the people with huge experience of civic society activities involvement, those who've come their own way in their countries, from non-governmental activism to leadership in NGOs to politics, to change situations in their respective countries. To be specific about names, we have invited a number of rather reputed politicians. Say the first, Kim Campbell, the first woman Prime Minister of Canada, first President of Lithuania, Vytautas Landsbergis, representative of the Communities of Democracy, Mateusz Elж, and many other leaders from civic society movements in Poland, like Krzysztof Stanowski, and there will be numerous human rights activists, particularly reps from Venezuela, Colombia, Indonesia, India, China. That is, those leaders who are really leaders of public opinion leaders in their respective countries with substantial experience we might benefit from. We will be glad to hear their recommendations and their best practice example to see what can be used in Ukraine, how we should develop in Ukraine to really make Ukraine change for the better. Thank you. My first question is from the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. What outcomes do you expect and how do you intend to use them? Every topic we have explained will have specific recommendations developed, as it will be practical recommendations. We will involve representatives of political circles and expert communities in Ukraine and abroad. Speaking of politicians from Ukraine, they will provide possibility actually to further implement the measures charted throughout the event. Speaking of international relations, we will cover matters related to the association agreement, the expected partnership agreement, a range of relevant topics in front of the coming Riga summit. We will try to expound our vision of the Eastern Partnership concept, given the difference between the time it was conceived and the current situations in Ukraine and beyond. So we'll have some very specific answers. Okay, you're going to produce some recommendations, probably internal recommendations for Ukraine or for the governments of Ukraine or the parliaments of Ukraine. You mentioned it might be possible to adopt some legislation based on these recommendations. But the question is, if it may be possible, then it may happen or may not. How you're going to contribute to see these recommendations being implemented. Further work to implement recommendation will surely ensue, and we will lobby them. We will launch our information-raising efforts, and we will really try to contribute to their implementation, also in the scope, in the form and scope of legislative changes. This is quite a substantial work to be pursued. How many NGOs from Ukraine are going to participate? It will be around 150 representatives. That is not organizations themselves, but representatives of NGOs. Yeah, it will be about representatives, but nevertheless, we are going to try to cover the whole spectrum rather than having several people from our organization. Any questions from the audience? If not, then another question from me. Are you going to involve also youth NGOs, or it will be kind of only adult ones? Actually, we circulated our invitations to all sorts of NGOs, whether youth organizations or not. No age considerations were involved. And coming back to your previous question, I'd like to add that generally the conference will see the developments of recommendations seen as milestones for NGOs and for grant organizations working in Ukraine. So it will be a kind of strategic planning exercise done by joint efforts of Ukrainian and non-Ukrainian NGOs. Will there be representatives of the government of Ukraine? Yes, they surely will be. Okay, thank you. If no further questions, I'd like to thank you and wish you all the successes in your endeavors. Our next briefing